Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annie. I am the co-founder and co-director of Storytellers of the Ancestral Road, the SOAR organization. Tonio LeFebre is going to join us this afternoon as a part of our 4th annual speaker series. I do want to note that SOAR is a grant-funded organization and say thank you to Arts and Society for funding our event today and for funding all 4 years of our speaker series events. I also want to make sure I say thank you to Giselle Bustos, who so graciously offered to video today's presentation so that we can put this presentation on Tonio's YouTube page so it can live on and be used as a resource for time to come. So that's a very exciting aspect in addition for today, so thank you very much, Giselle. Tonio LeFebre is a visual artist, a silversmith, and a language enthusiast, as he calls himself, who is going to be presenting today on his Piro language revival project. So join me in welcoming Tonio LeFebre.
Hola me masua. From Suez. Now Tonio LeFebre. Now na atiwahem kite. Na sama tsali he yo perron ma. So what I've said is welcome. Good day to you all. My name is Tonio LeFebre, and I'm a descendant of the Atsiwi, Atihem, the Piro people of Las Cruces, New Mexico. We live near Tortugas Mountain in Las Cruces. That's what we're affiliated. But our people are from all the Rio Grande Valley, from just south of Albuquerque all the way down even to Texas. We have our Piro descendants. I live here in Pueblo. I was born and raised here in Pueblo. My family has brought me here. They came here in the 1940s for work at the mill in various places, so that's how we landed up here from Las Cruces, but we've always maintained our ties with our cultural community over there in Las Cruces. In Las Cruces, we're known as a Piro Manso Tiwa tribe. There's Piros, Mansos, and Tiwas within that community. Our families are primarily Piro and some Tiwa, but identify as both. Again, I'm a descendant of the Piro and Tiwa Pueblo people of southern New Mexico. I'm an active member of my indigenous community. Growing up, we never had the real opportunity to be there on a continuous basis. It was hard in the 70s to make that trip all the way down to Las Cruces, which is about an 8 or 9 hour trip. Back in those days, it was 55 miles an hour, so it was a 2-day trip. And most of the time, we didn't have a car that would probably make it in one shot anyway. So, but my dad, he always helped us to maintain our tribal affiliation in any way he could. He was a bus driver and a limousine driver, so he often met people throughout his travels. And anytime that he could meet somebody of some kind of indigenous background, he would always bring them to us, and we would meet them, and he'd expose us to our indigenous culture, although be it not our specific. In 1998, as my sister and I grew into adulthood, we were able to, make a little more money and make those trips down there. And it was our plan to start building back that relationship back with our community down there. In 1998, my dad passed away suddenly, and we weren't able to go start doing that. So my sister and I, we made that commitment, saying, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do with Dad. So we're going to go do it. We'll continue to do it. So from 1998, that's when we became really active in our Piro community down there. And I believe, through his work, we've been able to do that. We started off going down there not knowing anybody, not knowing much of the culture specifically. We were just told, go down there and meet these people, and they'll take care of you. And that's what they did. They took us in, and they showed us the dances and the ways, and gradually from 1998 till now. So I was 28 years old when I really became somewhat active. And through the years, I had a conversation with Giselle. At one point, she was asking me about, how do you get active in your community? And it's a continuous journey. I didn't get active in this language program until I was 44. I never thought I would be able to do any of this work or have access to it or have the ability. My wife doesn't like me to say this, but I'm not a college graduate. I'm a high school graduate. I've just maintained my studies throughout my life. I've always been active here at the library. I just always learning on my own. So I'd like to put that out there because I like to let everybody know that you don't have to go to college to continue your education. You can educate yourself. You can continue. It's your motivation, your own self-motivation. So, like I say, in 2014, by a chance encounter, I was kind of thrown into this project. A couple of our elders had gone to a speaking engagement in Albuquerque, and there was a lady there by the name of Denny Seymour, and she was doing some work on the Tompito people of southern New Mexico, and she was lacking the language aspect. The Tompito people, which are our cousins, our Piro cousins to the east, and I found this was when the internet was first taking off, and I found a booklet on the internet of the Piro language, and it was an article written in about 1910. It was a published article in 1910. It was actually written in the 1800s of John Bartlett, and he had a list of Piro words that he had taken in the 1850s, and he had written this article about it, and it was pretty basic. It did give some background on it, and within that booklet, it had a copy of the Lord's Prayer in it, and that Lord's Prayer was taken down in the 1700s, and that was the key to this whole project. That's the only thing that we had that showed what our language sounded like, because by the time he came in the 1800s, the language had already changed a little bit. It was no longer spoken continuously. So before I get too far ahead, the name of this presentation that we call it today is called Revival, Revitalization, and Reconstruction of the Piro Language. It's an overview of a language resurgence for a southern New Mexico culture. Like I say, we maintained our culture throughout these years. We just didn't have that last key of the language. The songs that we have, we maintained them, but they were more chants. We didn't really have access to know exactly the meaning behind them. But without even the words, they omit a feeling, and that's what's kept us alive, the feeling of that culture. Many people believe that, they think that if you look in history books or write-ups on the Piro culture, you'll see that there are no longer Piros alive today. And myself, Jeff, and Renee, and Wanda are examples in front of you, Piro people that are still alive and still active in our communities. So we got language revival, revitalization, and resurgence, and the difference between the three. So language revival is bringing back the knowledge and use of a language that is no longer spoken. The language revitalization is the act of reversing language shift in order to halt or decrease its decline. Language resurgence is when a language that at one point had no active speakers, no native speakers, through revival, revitalization efforts has regained native speakers. So we were at the point of language revival because our language is no longer spoken. Not continuously. There's some older folks that still have some phrases and words and so forth, but no one that really speaks it in a way of communication other than just maybe saying a word or so forth, a small phrase. So basically, when you're looking at language revival, you're looking at, say for instance, you go to the secondhand store and you pick up a jigsaw puzzle, and it has 1,000 pieces on the box, and you open it up and you put it together there, and you're missing probably 500 of those pieces. You got the outer edges, and you have the structure of it, but you don't have the the middle part, or to actually show you what the whole picture is in that puzzle. And that's basically where we were with our language. Revitalization is like having all the pieces in that puzzle. Going to Walmart and you have all the pieces, it just has never been put together or used. So you put those pieces together, and now you have something to work with all the pieces there. And then the resurgence is what happens when you put the work in to revive that language. We're going to bring it back and use it now. So that's where we're at now, about in that place. We're about ready for the resurgence. We've started some programs and some things that we've been talking about as far as reintroducing it more into our communities. And it's hard for us because we don't all live in the community. So when a child, like say for instance, when a child is learning a new language, he's exposed to the language on a continuous basis. So you're not really having to teach them. They're learning by exposure. When we don't live in a community altogether and speaking it with one another, we have to find other resources and ways to relay that information to each other. So that's the challenge we're having right now. We're going to have that challenge because not having any continuous speakers within our communities or being together. So we're going to have to rely on things like the internet, videos, booklets, things like that, Zoom calls. That's what we rely on. And oftentimes it's looked at in a negative way. Some traditional communities might say, well, that's not the way we learn our language. We learn it from one another. Well, we don't have that opportunity. We're kind of a special case, you know. But I believe that if those elders back in the 1850s didn't share that knowledge with those linguists, we would have no key to even knowing what our language would even sound or look like or have an opportunity to revive what we have. So yes, it's not a traditional way, but I feel like they left that paper trail, that little trail of crumbs for us in order to grab up and eat so that we could come back and bring it back, because they knew that there was going to be a time when we wouldn't be able to do it traditionally. We'd have to go through different means. So we have to open our eyes. And sometimes we have to fight off some of that negative energy or the negative thoughts about, you know, the way people, especially in Native communities, it's sad. But there's a lot of judgment, especially on language, because language is how we identify ourselves from community to community. So, you know, you have Tiwa speakers all the way down the Rio Grande, but they all speak a little bit different, and that's how they identify themselves. But unfortunately, a lot of times, instead of saying, well, that's just the way they speak over there, they start criticizing. Well, that's wrong. You're saying it wrong. Look how funny they say it. They don't talk. And how often do we go through that even in learning like Spanish? You know, one of the things that kept me from learning Spanish is I would try to speak, and then elders would laugh at me, and I got embarrassed. So then I would never try it again, you know, because I would go home from school with what I learned over there, excited to speak what I knew, and then they would say, well, why are you talking like that? That's not the way you say it. You know, and then I don't want that to happen. So that's one of the main things I want to push when we're going through this language program with our people, is to never feel embarrassed about making a mistake, about asking questions and so forth. And that's what we have to do. That's how we keep our traditions alive. You know, whether it's dancing or, you know, traditional dress or whatever. Sometimes we don't have everything that we need, but we try to use what we have. And instead of criticizing, we see somebody that needs something, offer it to them. Give them what they need. So language revival, revitalization, and resurgence, again, is the process, importance, and the impact. So the process of reviving language is, first you have to analyze what you have. You get all the information that you have and analyze it. Look and see what you got to work with to begin with. Then you build a collection of that data, lay it all out, see what you have. Compare the data to possible cognate languages. Cognate means cousin, basically. So anything that's a cousin, that might be a cousin to the language that you're looking at. And then you document the comparisons to use in the processes. So what we did is, not knowing what Piro was initially, because it had been thought maybe it was Utoaztecan, it was maybe T1, directly T1. It might have been Tarahumara, and many of the other various languages in the Southwest. Kiowa is another language. Kiowa is a Tanoan language. You wouldn't think it is, but it's a Tanoan-based language. So what happened, because there was no native speakers, these linguists would go and they would take an analysis of our language, but then they would hit that wall. And once they hit that wall, they were like, well, there's no use continuing. There's nobody else that speaks it anymore anyway. So I almost feel like there was maybe some money there, and it was just part of the side project, and they just kind of did that because they really didn't push it past that. There were several linguists that did work on it. It's probably like 7 different linguists that did work throughout the time. Bartlett and Harrington had probably the most detailed analysis of it. But even at that, one of them, I think it was Harrington, he was a little lazy in hearing some of the phonetics of the language. And in our language, the phonetics are very important. You have long vowels and short vowels, and you have like kind of slurs and things like that. Aspirated tones, and all that makes a difference when you speak. You don't just speak it straight out. And if you don't use those tones, it takes a different direction in what you're saying, and that. So some of those linguists, whether maybe there was adapted to hearing a Western language, and in English we really don't have those sounds. So they just kind of grouped it as maybe, this guy has a slur, or maybe he's missing a tooth and that's why he pronounces it like that, or something like that. Not documenting those, and that really changed the way we see our language. So that was one of the things that I had. I ran into a wall when going back to my coming into this project. So I had that Bartlett list, and I had the one time when I was at the feast day, another gentleman, he must have had access to this also, and he recited the Lord's Prayer in our language, and it was like beautiful to hear our language. So I always wanted to, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'll share it with you. I'll share it with you," and he never did. He was always just carrot just waved, And so I came across that on the internet by chance. I found it, so I tried to teach myself to say it phonetically, and I would try to say it in English with English phonics, and it sounded horrible. It was like maybe somebody from Kentucky trying to speak Spanish for the first time. It didn't sound right. So I was like, then it clicked to me. Well, maybe I'll try. I'll use Spanish accents on it and pronounce it in Spanish. Once I started pronouncing it in Spanish, then it started sounding like the language. So I learned it phonetically. I didn't know what I was saying, but I just learned it, and I would say it, and I would say it. So then I would recite it at our feast days. Well, our two elders, they were pretty proud of me, and they kind of overspoke. They went and told this lady that I knew the language, which I didn't, and they left it at that. And so I got a call, and they said, "Well, this lady's going to talk to you about the language." I said, "Well, what about it?" And she said, "Oh, just talk to her." I said, "Well, I really don't know it at all. I mean, just what I tried to, say this prayer. Oh, just talk to her." So when I got on the phone with her, she had a whole different idea. She thought I spoke the language. She had been told that I was a native speaker, and I had all the access to it. And I wasn't going to lie. And one thing I do is I don't lie. I don't portray myself to be anything more than I am. And that's just the best way to go. And I was honest with her, saying, "I'm sorry, I don't know the language. This is what I know. I recite this prayer phonetically. I don't know what it means. I just know it's the Lord's Prayer. I assume each line matches up," and so forth. So at first she was a little disappointed. And she said, "Oh, you don't know what that?" I said, "No." And then she clicked and said, "Well, you know what? Would you like to learn?" I said, "Well, of course, we'd love to learn." Yeah, it's like we've never had the opportunity, because we often have people say they're going to come in and share it with us or help us, and then they never show up, or it just never follows through, and so forth. And we don't have the funding for it. We're not a federally recognized tribe. We're a group of descendants. I shouldn't say just. We are a group of descendants that live and continue our ways. And that's nothing bad, because there's hundreds and hundreds of non-recognized tribes in the United States. So she said, "Well, I have this project I'm working on. I already have some funding within that project for the language. I can change some words on it to make it so that we can get you a linguist, and you can work with this linguist, and maybe perhaps get some knowledge on your language." And through that chance, I was the only one that showed up, and I landed up sticking with it. And so I learned it in more of a scholastic way. And so it's not the way traditionally we learn our languages, but I learned a lot, not only about languages, but I learned about culture. I learned about how language intertwines with our culture, the importance of language, because you can get hooked on phonics. You can get Rosetta Stone if you're going to go to Mexico for a vacation, so that you can ask, well, where's the restaurant, or where's the restroom, and so forth. But that's not tying into the culture. That's not tying into the depth of what the language is. That's just communication. So it's been, well, since 2014, so 12 years now that I've been working on this. And I started off like I don't know nothing about linguistics. And this man, he was on a hiatus. He's a professor of linguistics at Arizona University. He's a very smart individual, and I was like way over my head. It was a whole language, learning a whole language of linguistics, just the terminology and so forth. And I was very fortunate that he was patient with me, and he realized that I was having trouble. And instead of giving up, we went and started cultural studies first, then folk culture, and then eventually it all tied in. And during that time, I started getting an analysis and more familiarity with words and so forth. So that's where it went to. So what we did is we took apart, we had that word list, and we analyzed it. Okay, what do we have? We took everything that we could find on Piro, we laid it all out. Then from there, like I say, we analyzed it. What is this, this, and this? We didn't make any judgments on it. We just built our collection of data. Then we had it, put it all together. Then we started comparing it to those other languages, Kiowa, Utoaztecan, Tarahumara, Zuni, all those languages they thought it was meant to be. And we did it in the simplest form. We took just cue cards, wrote out a word. If we had a word for deer, we took a word in each language for deer, and we set them aside, so on and so forth. We laid them side by side, then we looked at them visually. We tried to sound them out. We tried to find any comparisons that we could to make comparisons with them. As we started doing that, we started weeding out some of these other languages that were completely different, like Utoaztecan, Tarahumara, Zuni. Some words were, they're kind of words that are universal throughout the world, like the word for tata, for dad. I mean, anywhere in the world, that's kind of like the first word a kid might say. They call their dad tata or papa or things like that. Those are words that are common throughout the world, and we can't really make an analysis on languages, comparison analysis on those, so we kind of weeded those ones out. We went to the more direct words. So in doing so, at that point, we were able to weed out most of the non-Tanoan languages. And by Tanoan, I'm talking about Tiwa, Tewa, Towa, and then now we have Piro. And once we were able to have enough comparisons between all of them, all those languages have kind of a rooted system of rules. Now we could apply those rules to what we have on our language, and we can start looking at the structure of a sentence, the way it lays out, the sound coordination, between the two, where it changes. Some words change, some sounds change. Proto-Tanoan would be like Latin, and then from Latin you have all these other words. Portuguese, you have Italian, you have Spanish. They all come from that rooted system. But you could always go back to Latin and look at that main rooted system and start making your comparisons from that point on. So we're able at that point to apply it to Piro and see if it works structurally and so forth. And the more we compared it, the more it showed up to be a Tanoan language. Specifically a Tanoan language on itself, not just a cousin or a branch of, say, Tiwa, which is the common language in that area. In southern New Mexico is Tiwa. But then you have northern Tiwa. You have Picaries and you have Taos who speak Tiwa also, but they speak a different dialect of Tiwa. We kind of covered on some of that when I was talking about the impact of a language, losing the language and so forth. I'm going to move up a little bit into this page here. This is the one that says, starts off on our history of our people and how we made our migration down to where we're at. But a lot of these pueblos around this area, from here all the way across, further up actually, of Picary's Taos, and then on the backside, and all these most of them were all Tanoan speakers on the east side of the river. On the west side, you have some Kiris, and you have mostly Kiris on this side. You have Zuni a little further out, and you have Hopi further out that way. So our people, we started off in this area here, just south of Las Cruces. That's where our pueblos were at, our Piro people. I refer to us, when the Spanish first came, in their documents, they listed as the Atzehem. So our people refer to themselves as Atzehem or Atziwi. Piro we think, is a word that was given to us by kind of like a reference to us made by the Isleta people based on a ceremony that was taking place. Piro in Isleta is snake. And there's documentation by the Spanish that our Piro people had snake dances and snake ceremonies. There's one account that shows that there was a Isleta man that was a really important Isleta man that was sick, and that one of our people performed one of the snake ceremonies and cured him. So they say maybe that's why a reference for Piro came from, snake, because of the snake ceremony. The Western way of thinking thinks that it's a derogatory term for us, because in the Western world we say, he's nothing but a snake, slithering snake. in our culture, the snakes aren't. Our snakes carry the snakes carry our prayers and our ceremonies back into the ground where our ancestors live. We believe we came from 3 worlds previous to this one, from down below. Not hell. It was just 3 different worlds down below. So those snake ceremonies carry those ceremonies, those prayers, those songs back down into our to our ancestors to help us. So it's not a derogatory term. Later on towards the end of the presentation, I'll share with you my analysis of that word Atzihim and what I feel like it comes from. So around the mid 1500s to late 1500s, 1500s to 1600s, there was drought and there was a lot of hard times for our people up here. By that time, the Spanish had come up, and it was said that they had already built a relationship with the Spanish, and so they were asked. They say they were invited to go down to the Guadalupe mission in Juarez, which had already been established for the Manso people. The Manso people lived along the Rio Grande near Las Cruces, all the way up in El Paso and back in that area. They weren't really a Pueblo people, but they were people that migrated up and down the rivers, fishing and hunting and foraging in that area. They were a different culture, and it's again, at the end of the program, I'll go over an analysis of what I think what Manso spoke, because there's very little documentation about the Manso. Once they went into the mission, the Spanish, their whole idea was to convert them over to Christians and Mexicanize them and so forth. So you had Mansos already in Guadalupe, and then when our people were having a hard time, they went down to the Guadalupe mission to survive, basically. And some accounts say that we were forced down there. Some said that we went on our own. It's hard to say. Just like now, if we're having hard times, are we going to sit here and die, or are we going to take our people to somewhere else, or families somewhere that we can live and survive, right? We'll adapt. And that's what I feel like our people did. So by the 1600s, all of the Piro pueblos had been abandoned. And that was just in Senacu and just south of Senacu. There was probably about, they say anywhere from 15 to 20 some Piro pueblos. And we're looking at small settlements, anywhere from 30 families to 100 families. They weren't these huge settlements. When the Spanish came, then they grouped all those Piro settlements into 3 big ones around this area. And they destroyed all those settlements and rebuilt all the new settlements with those supplies. And at that point, that's when they put the mission churches in them. But like I said, by 1600s, they had already abandoned those. So just south of Isleta in New Mexico, just actually south and west, you can see all these there. Tepana Pueblo here, that's another word that I worked on. Just a quick on that one there. Te and Tiwa, so they spelled it Tepana in the Spanish documents, Teypana. So it sounds like a Spanish word, Tepana. And so these are words that the Spanish wrote down. And again, these people weren't linguists; they were just writing down what they heard, and phonetically. So if you think you just say Tepana, well, what does it mean? Does it mean So going back and being familiar with the sounds and the correspondence, or they call the morphemes of a word. The pieces of a word that mean something is a morpheme. So words are made up of morphemes. Like you have like decompose. So D would be one part, compose would be another. Those are morphemes. So I'm more familiar with those morphemes now in the Tiwa language since I've been working on them. I've been able to identify that Tepana is actually a Tanoan word. Te meaning village, Pa meaning river, and Na is a noun marker. So it means literally a river village. And that's my theory on it. And I feel like it corresponds right because about, right now, it's probably about 500-600 yards away is Rio Grande from where the village remains are. So we know that rivers change courses. It could have been that the river was a little bit closer at that point, and that's why it was called River Village. So that's my theory on it. And the thing is, I feel lucky because I'm not a scholar and I'm not here to prove anything to anybody. These are all things based on just what I feel and intuition and so forth. And that's what I'm here for. I'm not really here to convert you and say, well, I'm the all-known Piro. These are just my thoughts, my theories on things like this. And I want to open up conversations so people can utilize their, their own thoughts. And but I really feel like that's what it is. It falls right in line. Village, river, and then the noun marker. And that falls along the sequence of our or they call the syntax of our language, how subject, object, verb basically is the way our sentence structure lines up in Tanoan languages. So you can basically look at for the most part, look at a Tanoan language, and for the most part, they break down into subject, object, and then verb when you break them down. So the subject would be first would be village. This would be with the modifier. So village, water or river village, and then na is a noun marker, a singular noun marker. So it basically means a water village. And that's a common thread between all the Tanoan languages usually have a noun marker at the end, whether it starts off with na, or in our language. Okay. I think I went through this where we migrated and landed up at the Guadalupe village in Juarez, and where we went from there. So the migrations to other cultural communities ignited the dormancy of the Piro language. So and then after the revolt of 1680, the Sledan T1 people were forced down there. They took like 300, and I think to be exact, like 383 prisoners of war, basically forced those T1 people down into Guadalupe mission. So now you had Mansos and you have Piros, and then now you have T1s coming in there. So it was a large village. It wasn't aggregated into everybody together. They did keep them separated. But within that village, they had to communicate with one another into a common place to go, get their food or market, whatever. So the easiest language for all of them to learn, or I wouldn't say learn, they were probably forced to learn Spanish, because the Spanish weren't going to learn Piro, or they weren't going to learn Tanoan, and they were going to force them, you learn our language. That's how dominant they were. Just like all those theories and things where they said in all the accounts where they first encountered our people coming north, they called them humanos, because by the time they got up to where our people were at from Mexico City, they were ill-equipped. They were so arrogant. They were more worried about having their armor and their weapons and so forth. They were ill-equipped with the things they needed, food and so forth. So by the time they got to our people, they were dying because they were starving. They were cold. Their clothing was worn out by them. Their animals were dying because they had no water. So their accounts say that our people brought them in and took care of them and nursed them and so forth. We know that most of the Spanish in those times weren't like that. They went in and probably took what they wanted, and then of course they were funded by the viceroys and the kings back in Spain, so they still had to have accountability. So they're not going to write back and say, "Oh, these people, we came in and we just took everything we needed," because those kings and queens still had some morals over there. They didn't want to go throughout the world like dominating that way. They wanted it to be a positive way. So of course they're going to send back accounts saying that these people were willing to give us what they want. They're going to say we came in and took and pillaged them. So they call them humanos, which means like the humane ones. There's another theory back with the Manso, and we'll go through that at the end. For the longest time, the reference of the people that they first encountered at the border, which were the Manso people along the Rio Grande, south of Texas. Am I going too fast? I need to slow down. I really enjoy interaction, so if you have questions or anything like that you want to offer, feel free, because I don't want to just be up here throwing everything at you guys. So this here is a linguistic migration trail of Tanoan language. So this is how we feel the Tanoan languages spread out throughout the Southwest. So initially we had the homelands of the Tanoan language, thinking they're in the Four Corners area, around this area. There was different cultures. They were all different cultures, but they spoke a similar language, and we think that was Proto-Tanoan. Initially, it was referenced as Proto-Kiowa Tanoan, because some of the early linguists tried to force Kiowa into a Tanoan language, and instead of categorizing it as a Tanoan language, like within the sequence, they were trying to make it its own language, like Kiowa and Tanoan were that was like the first language. But some of our studies that Dr. Shaul did kind of show that it wasn't a dominant language, it was more of a language that followed through the Proto-Tanoan language. So Proto-Tanoan, again, to be like the mother language, kind of like Latin, and then from there, everything separated from there. So you have Proto-Tanoan at the top, that's where it first started, and then they started separating. So then you had Kiowa, Towa, and Tiwa Tewa. But at this point, they were still integrated similarities. They weren't completely separated. So you could still identify, if you break it down and go backwards. So what we do is we go from what we have here, and then we start going backwards and building what we feel by sound correspondences, things like that, that are common throughout the world, through all languages. We apply those rules to this language, and then we can work backwards from what we have now and identify it to a proto-language. So that's how, we can say, well, how do you know what they spoke here? And it's basically theorized by backing up from here to there. So if you do that, and you find out that, okay, when it first broke off, they broke off, but they still had similarities. They still overlapped one another. They were separated some. They had main differences, but they still overlapped a little bit. Then as time went on, Kiowa was separated out completely at this point. Towa, Tewa, and Tiwa stayed with similarities among them. Kiowa, as you see, it just went off by itself. And you see the separation. Now we had Towa separating, and then you had Tiwa and Tewa that were still very close in similarity. Then you had Towa separating completely, where has its own distinct characteristics even to this day. And then you have Tewa and Tiwa still had at this point, as Towa separated, Tewa and Tiwa still had some overlapping, and then Tewa and Tiwa separated to where they have specific characteristics to them that you can completely identify them with by themselves. And then you have, again, Tewa still by itself, never came back at this point. It didn't come back at this point, it's still separated. But then you had Northern Tiwa and Southern Tiwa at this point. Northern Tiwa being Picaries and Taos, and those villages on the backside of the mountain of Taos. And then you have Southern Tiwa, you have Sandia, you have Isleta, now Isleta del Sur down in Texas. And then you see a resurgence of Tewa and Tiwa again, starting to have these similarities, and then this is where we're at now. So there are some similarities again with Tewa and Tiwa, just slight. They're not deeply intertwined. And then Southern Tiwa is all by itself. So to give you a perspective of what it looks like on a map, so they all started here. Kiowa, like you see, it separated and went on its own. We know that the Kiowa people went all the way up here, and then they started migrating back. As they came back, they came back not straight down, but they went east, and they became integrated into what we know as a plains tribe of today. Their language still has Proto-Tanoan characteristics to it, so it's still Tanoan, Proto-Tanoan language. Then you had Kiowa was a living language, yeah. Then you have Towa, and so Towa would be right around here. And so this is the Four Corners area. Towa is directly in Jemez and Pecos, and they did a short migration. They went just over right here. It was in this area. They stayed close over here. Probably, let's see, where's Jemez? So it's probably about right here, actually. They stayed about right here on this side of the river. They're about right here. So they stayed here with very little interruption from any other cultures. And then you had Tiwa and Tewa. Tiwa Tewa moved over. So you have the Tewa villages that went just a little further west and south of where Jemez is, and they maintain their Tewa language. And then you have Tiwa. Tiwa went straight across over here, where Taos is at. And so you have Picaries, and then you have Taos right around this area, somewhere around this area right here. So for the longest time, these stayed here. So then there's a migration that happened. Now all of a sudden you have Southern Tiwa. So you say, well, how did it get down here? And why is it different than the languages up here? For whatever reasons, by the time these speakers got down here, they had been influenced by other languages at this point. And maybe not only that, but they've developed other sounds and correspondences that make them distinct. So this, you notice this doesn't have nothing about Piro, because at this point when this article was written, it was written by Dr. Scott Ortman at the University of Colorado. He did extensive research on the there's an article, a really good article, it's called The Kiowa Odyssey, and it talks about this whole migration of Tanoan languages and so forth. I was, through Dr. Shaul, I've been able to meet with him on a few occasions, and Dr. Shaul and I were able to give presentations to his classes, which is an honor, because we're able to give presentations to this man's classes on our research and our work on the Piro language. So what we think is because our Piro people are way down here, but they don't speak, the language they speak isn't similar to the southern Tiwa people. It's more closely related to the northern Tiwa people, very similar, more to even Picaries and Taos. We know that Taos became an aggregated culture, which means like it's just like thinking of rocks, like aggregate and rocks. You go and you spread aggregate in your yard, and you have like orange colors and red colors and white colors. That's what they call an aggregate in a community, and that's the way that communities build up sometimes. So Taos became an aggregated community of a lot of different cultures. There's Plains people around this area. There's even people that migrated up and so forth. But the one thing that was unique about Taos is they always kept their Tiwa language. Even though all these other cultures came in, they didn't allow their language to change. They kept the Tiwa language. They brought them in. So you have a lot of influences in the Taos community, but their language is very Proto-Tanoan. And then you have Picaries, which is even closer to Proto-Tanoan. So the reason we say that it's very close to Proto-Tanoan, the original language, is because it took a short migration to about here with very little interruption. So Picaries and Taos are probably some of the two oldest speaking Tanoan villages. So we're down here, and our language sounds very similar to these villages up here. Why? So there's two theories behind why our Piro language is more similar to northern Tiwa than it is to southern Tiwa, or more Proto-Tanoan. Either our people took a quick migration down here, all the way down here with very little interruption from any other culture, and we stayed there. We came across and went there fast. Or there's indications, archaeological indications that that we had villages down here initially, and there's about 33% of the word list that doesn't tie into any other language within these other languages, so they're unaccounted for. That tells us that perhaps we already lived here speaking our own language. There's archaeological evidence that there's villages there, and then they were abandoned, and these people left for a period of time, but then they came back after a long period of time and rebuilt on top of those same ruins. So you have, ruins down here, and then several years later you have ruins up here. So that tells us they went somewhere and came back. The other theory is that they moved up and lived among the T1 speakers up here for a period of time, borrowed some of the language, and then brought it back down when they came down here. And they continue to keep those. They call them artifacts. Just like when you go and dig up an archaeological site, you find artifacts, right? Pots and weavings and so forth, and it tells you about the culture. Well, there's linguistic artifacts, and those linguistic artifacts tie in to these languages up here. So when we do our analysis on Piro, based on that Lord's Prayer, because that Lord's Prayer is the only indicator that we have what our language sounded like at that period of time. Everything else after that are just word lists. So we'll move on forward to that. I think I have it here. This is a word list of John Bartlett. And the trouble I had is when I was trying to interpret the Lord's Prayer from this word list, nothing matched up, because he wrote everything on here in English text or English ways, vowel systems. And you'll see on the Lord's Prayer, it's using Spanish vowel systems. So where you would use K-I in English, it's Q-U-I in Spanish. Tatas, those fall in line. Nasal, where you have an L or double L, we know that in Spanish, double L is usually a Y sound. Because in here, you actually have Ys. So it wouldn't make sense to use a Y here and use an L here. So we know that this sound isn't the same as this sound, even though we know phonetically they make the same sound. That allows us to break these down in different ways like that. So once we started working with Dr. Shaul, we started looking at that and saying, okay, well, now we'll change everything. We can either do it this way, we can either continue to follow it through in Spanish vowel system or phonetics, or we can change these so we can compare them with the data, because all the linguists after that came and they wrote everything in English data. So it was easier to change these sound correspondence to English phonetics. So everywhere there was a QUI, we changed it to a KI. Everywhere there was a double L, we changed it to a Y. We realized that this ending Y is a hard E. It's a Y. So it's more like an accented I or accented. It's like, let me see. Would it be a hard Y? Like yellow, right? Yellow is a hard Y compared to happy. Right? There's a difference between the two. So a double L would be like the Y in happy, but the Y at the end would be more of a yellow. So we know that that's an accent, using an accented sound or a hardened sound. So we know that that's a unique sound there. Where there's a GU, in Spanish there's no W. There isn't a W in Spanish. So we know that the GU in Spanish makes a woo sound, right? So we can put a W where there's a GU. And that changes a lot. And that opened, at that point, it started matching up to the sounds that Bartlett had on his list. So we were able to break things down. So he is by itself, KI, 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 AMO. Once you get the language, you start listening, once you start getting the feel of the language, then you can start sounding it out, and you start building almost a melodic saying to it. So if you say it melodically, instead of saying ki ta ta, sound it out, then you say it melodically, it's ki ta ta nasal yapol watol hui. See, it's almost like a song. And you can, at that point, you can start breaking it down like a song. The sounds start changing. So we know that. So we went to the word list, and then on Bartlett's word list, he has ki ta ta means our Father. Anyway, there it is. Okay. So we start breaking it down, and it doesn't mean just Father. Let's see. I'll find it on here. Well, on here it shows us just meaning Father, right? So when we went back to the Lord's Prayer, we started looking at comparing where in the Tanoan languages where ki is a pronoun, meaning it's a possessive pronoun in the other Tanoan languages. So now we know that wherever there's a ki, it means our or us. So tata among the other Tanoan languages is very similar as a tata or ta, meaning father. And then this is a misprint here, and this is actually a hard E. This corresponds to the other Tanoan languages as a noun marker as na or na. But we see that in our language it's an e. So, and it means to be something or a something. So this doesn't just mean father, it means our Father is. It's a whole phrase within itself. So then it starts opening up. So then we now, this one word we have, now we know that the e at the end is a noun marker, and we can apply it to all these other different places. We know that the ki at the beginning is a pronoun, a possessive pronoun. We can add it to all those, and it starts opening up all these other keys into the language. And so that's basically what we did. We started changing things through. What's very unique about this is I've been working on it, and we know that it was taken in the 1700s, and more than likely this Lord's Prayer was probably forced upon the people to recite, right? When you go into a village, you're going to take over something. Who are you going to take over first, right? You're going to try to convert the leader or the one most respected in the village, which would probably have been a cacique or maybe a chief of some sort, war captain or so forth. So they probably had that person do this translation for them. as I've been working on this translation of the Lord's Prayer, there's different parts of it where it changes from personal pronouns to like a first person to third person. So parts in there, like say where it talks about sins, forgiveness, things like that. We didn't have that in our culture. We didn't have sins. We didn't think about sins. We didn't sin to one another. We didn't have to ask for forgiveness because we didn't do those things to one another. Things like where it talks about things like that. It changes from that person reciting that prayer from I and my to you and them. And I feel like he did that because these people were probably forced to recite this prayer because they probably would have been beaten or whatever. He probably did it in a way so that they were able to recite this prayer, but it didn't go against the true beliefs of what they really were. So on that first line, it says, Kitata e nasal e apolhua. Kitata is our Father that is. Na is your. Sal, it means warm or hot. And that threw me for a loop there. I was like, why would hot be in the thing there? As I was working with one of my Tiwa speaking brothers, he opened up to me that Sal isn't hot, but it's radiance. It's a radiant heat, right? So his radiance, not his hot, not his heat. So kitata e nasal e. In that place, if you see it, it's a whole separate word. Oops, go back. It's not attached. It's a separate word. And this is one of those places where when it's a separate, it looks the same, but this e by itself means comes. So when you say it separately without an accent or an extended or hard ending on it, it changes it from something that is to something that comes. So in this place, it's a verb. So it says, our Father that is, his radiance comes. Yapol means the sky. Hua means far out. So our Father that is, his radiance comes, sky far out. Tol is sun. And then Hui means, is a how you got it, progressive, present progressive marker, like is doing something, ing. So it happens now. It's happening now and always. It's going to continue. So basically that first line says, our Father, that is, his radiance comes from the sun. Continues now and forever. At that point, it starts to change because at that point, things don't line up with what they say and things start to change. I can go on, but they start changing from first person to third person, and that's when I realized that person has done this so that the person can recite this without going against. Okay. So, where are we today? Enough work has been accomplished at this point to begin sharing with other tribal members vocabulary and phrases to ignite the resurgence of our Piro language in our respective communities. Tribal leadership is currently engaged in planning an educational structure for the people. And that's where we're at today. And to be honest with you, I have more knowledge of the written language than visually. I don't have an opportunity to speak with very many people. I'm not a fluent speaker, and that's where myself and Jeff are going to come in, and we're going to start working on projects so we can start sharing phrases with one another. And even within our household, there's one gentleman in California who I shared this with early on, and he just went off on his own. He just went crazy with everything. He's writing notes all over the house. He shows me his house on the refrigerator. He's got phrases and everything. He has his mom saying goodnight. I mean, he's way ahead of the game, and it's awesome. That's great. Well, we've been able to form a written language based on this. It's not so much written to the point as being used in the communities. It's more used for, the written language is more used for educational purposes than anything else.
Wasn't that intentional so that your language wasn't taken?
Yeah, it could be. There's different views on that. Yeah. But then again, like I say, we were talking earlier, if those people that shared that information with these linguists were going to be like that. A lot of that came after the early 1900s, because in our traditional ways as Pueblo people, we were taught that we emerged from underneath, and when the three worlds before here were dark. Right? They weren't bad, they weren't horrible, they were just in darkness. We didn't have color, we didn't have a lot of things we had here. So just like some of the biblical stories, those worlds were destroyed because of the way people were acting and carrying on with one another, right? So this world that we're in now, Ma is called. Ma is like the all great one, the creator, so forth. He created this world for us to come into, a new world. And we weren't Indian people, we were just people. He placed an opening in the ground and he told us to go out into 4 directions. We were to pick a corn color for the clan that we're going to coincide with. And each corn clan has specific duties to do. So you had maybe one going to the east, one to the north, one to the west, and one to the south. They vary just depending on which pueblo you're from and culture-wise. But these people were supposed to go to the end of the world and back, not to the end of the United States, the end of the world and back 4 times and gain knowledge and come back to the place of emergence, and we were supposed to share all this knowledge with one another. It was meant for everybody so that we could all live as one in unity, equity, right? Not equality, but equity. We all had the same tools, equitable, to live within this world with one another. As time passed on, we realized that if I knew more about you, about something than you did, I could use that as leverage against you, and I can have some kind of leverage and so forth. Whatever it may be. Other cultures coming in, maybe just our people started to learn about those things on their own. So most of the time, up until the early 1900s, our pueblos they were kind of far out. People didn't really come to New Mexico and to the villages out here for vacations, right? But then they opened up, I forgot the name of Harvey, I think his name is Harvey. He opened up this travel thing to Santa Fe, and you could come on the train, and then he would take these cars out to all the different villages and bring all these tourists to come to the villages. At that point, those people from the east and didn't have knowledge of our cultures. They were going into our kivas and they were stealing things. They were taking our dances. These dances and ceremonies were open for the most part. Now, there were a lot of them are held sacred, but for the most part, they were open for everybody because all this knowledge was supposed to be meant for all of us. But when they started stealing and doing and pillaging and things like that, taking sacred things from our villages, that's when things became closed off. And a lot of the ceremonies became closed off, languages, songs, things like that were not shared. And even to this day, a lot of them are very closed off. The Pueblo villages are very lucky because we came in through the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty through Mexico. So in that treaty, we were allowed to keep our lands. So we weren't taken away from our lands like the Plains people and those forth. That's why they have such anger and fights and struggles, because they were taken directly away from their home places and placed in places completely different. As Pueblo people, we were allowed to at least stay in our lands and maintain our villages and maintain our ceremonies after that revolt of 1680. That was the whole reason for that revolt of 1680, is when the Spanish came in, they were trying to convert everybody over and wanted to convert everybody over to Christianity. And they were, just doing horrible things to our people. After the revolt of 1680, in 1680, the Pueblo people, it wasn't, all the Pueblo people aren't the same. They don't have the same feelings and thoughts about one another. There's a lot of, competition between them. But they knew that the only way they were going to survive is by coming together at one time. So Pope, he was a leader in San Juan. He sent runners out with these ropes to each of the villages. And he and some other leaders, they put together this revolt and said, we're going to send runners out. We'll give them these ropes with knots. And every day that passes, a knot is to be taken away. And then when there's no more knots, that's the day that we're all going to revolt at the same day. That's the way we're going to get these Spanish people out of here. And that's what they did. On that same day, when all the knots were gone, they all revolted at the same time. And they were able to push the Spanish out of New Mexico for 12 years. So for 12 years, they rebuilt the kivas, they rebuilt a lot of the ceremonies and so forth. Eventually, the Spanish people started coming back. There's different stories about that the Spanish tales say that the Indian people couldn't live without them and they needed their help and so forth. They crept back. But they knew that if they came back, they weren't going to be able to do the things they did again. So now that's why you have this integration of religious practices in the villages, of Catholic religious practices. Some people they practice both religions, like I do, and they intertwine. Some people believe in just the native way. Some people just practice, the Catholic way.
Even though they have drums at Mass.
Yeah. So you have feast days. So the feast days came about is because the only days that the Pueblo people were allowed to conduct their ceremonies were on days of the Feast of the Saints. So they kind of tricked the Spanish into saying, well, we're honoring the saints with our songs and so forth. But those were the days they were able to come out and actually conduct their ceremonies and so forth. So you have most of your Pueblo feast days. You have feast days, and those are big celebrations for everybody. But then you have private celebrations and ceremonies throughout the years. And most of the time, those are sacred ceremonies that were kept specifically native, and those usually stay behind closed walls, and only native people or people that they are entrust to secure those are allowed to conduct those.
Can you kind of explain a little bit of the way when we do the live ceremonies with the
Yes.
Santes, how they would use the little girl?
Yeah, so in a lot of the villages, they utilize or they use the matachines dance. And the matachine dance, if you're familiar with it, it was a dance that was brought over from Spain. And again, that was another tool that the Spanish tried to use to convert others over to Christianity. And it's a theatrical dance that talks about this king that was abducted by the Moors who occupied Spain for the longest time, who were a Muslim religion, and they tried to convert that king over, and they couldn't convert him over, so they finally let him loose. So he went back to his kingdom, and he told this story how no matter what they did to him, he always kept his faith in Christianity and in Christ. So his people in his community built this theatrical act that talks about the whole thing that happened with him. And so you have 12 matachines, and those represent the disciples of Christ. Then you have a king, and then you have a little girl. And that king represents Christianity, or represents that king, and then the little girl represents actually the Christianity. She's usually dressed in white, and so she's a girl of purity. And what the Spanish did is every country that they went to, that they would go to convert the natives. So just about every country that Spain went to, there's a version of the matachines dance. And they would take this dance and they would use it theatrically to try and entice the people and say, this is how beautiful it is to be a Christian, and it's about this king that went through all these things, and he was never able to be converted, and this is how strong our faith is. But most of the time, because of language barriers and so forth, they didn't understand what they were talking about, but it was beautiful. And so there's ribbons. It's a really beautiful dance. There's violins, and so every country has their own version of it, basically. But you go into Mexico, and then Mexico has changed that version into Montezuma and La Malinche. Malinche was the little girl that helped the Spanish to conquer Montezuma and the Aztec nation, or the Aztec culture. So they use her, and so when in Mexico, the translation is usually based on that story of Montezuma and Malinche. Malinche means the betrayer. So the king represents Montezuma, and then the little girl represents the girl that the Spanish used to betray him. So there's the versions, yeah.
Can you talk about like the Tanoan, and was that like at some point an ethnic group that the Tijuana, everybody?
So when you talk about Tanoan is basically the language. It's almost like, okay, you have Spanish, right? But then you have Puerto Ricans and Cubans, and you have Mexicans, and you have Spanish. We all speak Spanish languages, but each culture is diverse. So that's kind of like when we speak Tanoan. So it just references the people. Now, as Pueblo people, we have kind of like a pan culture that's based on probably those early teachings and our migration stories and so forth. And those, you'll find some of those similarities throughout. But then as those cultures ventured out on their migrations and they came back, they brought some of that knowledge and so forth. And so you have all these different cultures still. Even from some of these pueblos are like 20 miles away from each other, and they're very diverse. They're different. But they speak similar languages, but they're very distinct. They know that that's not their language, the way it's spoken. And mostly it's sound correspondences, the way you say things. So the importance of bringing back language is not just to be able to communicate. Like I say, you can get Rosetta Stone, or you can get those things, and you can learn enough language to go to a country to be able to correspond with somebody to get what you need. What we're doing, with our languages is conducting, even with our Spanish language and so forth, it's a big part of our culture. The way we say things, the way we do things, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we relate with one another. I was sharing a story with Annie the other day. There was a guy on Facebook, and he was saying, my grandma used to say, "Cállate, yosico," to tell me to be quiet. Does anybody know what that means? And it was like there was like 10 different versions. Oh, it means be quiet. It means shut up. And so it was like, that's a pretty harsh way. And none of them were like a literal meaning of what it meant, which means like kind of like, close yourself, your hole, which means like, close your hole, it's kind of a rude way. So, you wouldn't tell anybody that in public. When you tell them to be quiet, you wouldn't say, that guy, you land up getting in a fight or something, so, that's the importance of relaying the proper message of what you're saying. My thing is like, I can tell people like, they say, well, how do you say this? Okay, I could just tell you to say it, but do you want to just say it, or do you want to know what you're saying? I think it's important to know what you're saying. What I said today, when I said Hrom Su'eh, it means good day, just good day. Hrom Su'eh. Hrom is day, Su is good, and E means a good day. A good day. If I wanted to be more personal to you, I could say Kiam Sohrom Su'eh, which means may your day be good. If I wanted to give you a feeling or a blessing of a good day, then I would say Hrom Suma. Ma is a state of being. It's a whole different way of saying it. So I could say good day in 3 different ways to you. So you say, well, how do you say good day? Hrom Su'eh, good day. There's not really meaning behind it. It's just saying good day. I want to say more personal. Kiam Sohrom Su'eh. May your day be good. It's almost a blessing, right? And then just Hrom Soma means may you have a feeling of a good day. May you go with peace in this day. It's almost a different way. And you use it in different ways, right? It's kind of an informal meeting we're having today. So I felt it was okay to say it in an informal way. We were just talking. Maybe if I was conducting a ceremony or we're at mass or something, I would say it in a different way, more of a prayer or more of a personalized way. So that's the importance of just saying it or knowing what you're saying. And so that's my thing, is I want people to know what they're saying. These are some examples that I've come up with of some ideas that we can relay. Are we going over too far?
I mean, it's 3:15, so I would say like maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, almost done. Okay, I'm sorry. So these are just some ideas that I come up with to kind of relay the information. And then we started about. This gives.
How was your life? Ela mostrou I like it.
Okay, this gives you several elements to learn from. So you see an image, you get to see the words and follow along. You get to hear somebody say them, and then you get a translation of them saying them. And then you get to hear someone else speak it. So if it was me just doing it all the same way, you'd get more familiar with my voice than somebody else. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get other people in the community to do some of these, so they can not just be familiar with me saying it and say, well, hearing me say it, but then when Giselle says it, or Jeff says it, or Debbie says it, it's the same words, but it sounds different, right, when you hear it from somebody else. So and I think all those elements put together in something like this will be very beneficial. We can send them out and share them to our community members. And this kind of gives us that way of being able to speak with one another and hear other people's voices without being in that community directly. Here's another example. So this would be, whoops. Let's see.
You are now.
Again, it's me speaking on this one, so it's a different voice that you're hearing it from. It gives you a visual of people eating, and then it also gives you a breakdown.
This is on your website?
No, these are things that I'm putting together to share for our community. And these are kind of trying to get these learning tools put together so that we can start sharing them. When I said this is where we're about at ready now, we haven't started sharing them just yet. I'm trying to make it as.
So do you think at one point, or like is it the dream that kids will get to learn this language in school?
That is our, yeah. Right now we have a lot of young kids now. For the longest time, it was mostly elders, and there was hardly any kids, and it was kind of dire. It was like, there was times when I was in this project, like, who am I even doing this for? Because all these people are getting older, and then all of a sudden, there's this saying in our culture that says, if you act or say your language or interact with some part of your culture every single day, that your ancestors will wake up and they'll start dropping you more and more things to help you continue. But you have to put the work in, just like anything else. You don't say a prayer and you don't prepare for something and then pray to God on the way to your test and say, please help me pass this, because you haven't put any preparation, right? You have to be prepared, and you ask Him for, give me the strength to recall the things that I've worked at, right? It's a different way of saying things. So, and that's what we've realized in this project is, we had list of 150 words in that article. That's what we started with. We have over 500 cognates of words now. We have ways of knowing what the language looks like. We can put it together. We have all these things. And it didn't come all at once. It was just like little. And every time we do them, then all of a sudden they get this burst of things. And then burst of things. And we're like, geez, Of course, at the point I was telling Jeff earlier, I have stuff everywhere. I'm trying to put things together so I can do that. So on this particular one, you actually have me saying it. It has the saying in Piro, and it has the breakdown in literal sense, right? You all eat, come now. And then it breaks it down into what it would basically mean if you're saying somebody to come and eat. Y'all come and eat. So that way you know what you're saying. You're saying it the way it's supposed to, because it's not a straight literal translation from English to Piro. So it's a different sequence, right? So it's you eat, come now. And this in English it would be y'all come eat, right? Now. You don't really say now, but it's giving that essence of like, come and eat. Y'all come and eat.
Tonio, you bring up about food. One of in anthropology, we talk about the last thing to disappear in a culture is food.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like sweet potato meaning something grown under the ground, which is very special, as you talked about. Sweet being something you add to it.
Mm-hmm.
But those words seem to last longer than others.
Yeah.
If you have any native speakers at all.
That's your connection.
Another thing that lasts really long, we found this with Spanish. My dissertation research was on Chicano leadership, but we picked up a lot of things in that. One of them was dichos, sayings, and people continue to use the sayings, even though they don't use some of the words in common modern language that's moving.
Yeah.
So you go back to some of the dichos, and and there's a couple books on Spanish dichos, and I'm reading them in Spanish, and that's not the modern word that we use. So that means that word that's in that dicho is probably another couple hundred years old.
Yeah.
And then in the older Spanish, you also pick up where they've integrated some of the native languages into the Spanish, like a dipper. It looks like a scoop, long handle. People used to drink from that. You get a bucket of water and they drink. The name for that we currently use here in southern Colorado, I can't remember it. But the word for dipper is actually a Navajo word. It's not a Spanish word that we use. Wahatoyas is not a Spanish word, although we spell it the Spanish way with a J and an LL. But it's not a Spanish word, it's an Indian word.
Yeah, you'll see that a lot in southern Tiwa, in Isleta, because they're so much closer to the Spanish coming up. You'll have there's canoa, which means canoe. There's a word for bird, it's paloma. They just kind of use it the same way. Yeah, but food is that's something we're always continuing to use. So those are the last words that usually go away. Here's another idea I had of doing a Piro word find. And so you would have to use the lexicon or the dictionary to be able to look up the word and then find it and use it in different ways. All right, so that's the last thing I wanted to share was just give you an example of where we're at today. Because like I say, we started off having these songs and so forth that we would use phonetically and more use them for the feeling of the song, and we didn't have words to them. But I've been able to put words and build songs and build dances with with the melodies that we had. To give you an idea of this song here, it was lent to us or given to us by a man from from Okewinga, and it was their Buffalo entrance song. And it was yo hey I go, hey I go, hey ah. Mostly phonetics, what we thought. Now I've been able to put words to it so that it's ours. So it's wakwe hui na yotson lechi, and it has meaning now. It says they come, they're coming, the buffalo will have come. So now we're able to tell the story because we have words that we can use now. So just do this real quick and give you an example of what it sounds like. That's a drum, sorry about that. So this is a sense, in the senses of a theatrical act for us, of this visitation of the buffalo that are coming to our village. So the first song, it says, it's like the village crier saying, they're coming, they're coming, the buffalo are coming. I hear the thunder, I see the clouds, they're coming, the buffalo are coming. The second song talks about they've come and they get a blessing, the buffalo are being blessed, and then it says they come to our village today to dance, they dance hard for us, the buffalo have come to dance hard. And the third song is like a celebration. The fourth song it goes into the beginning. It's almost like the climax is the celebration, and then it starts to decline in the story. The buffalo go and they bless the four directions, and then the final song, they go around and it's an exit song, and it's kind of a solemn song. It's almost like a visitation when you have this visitation from a family member or someone that you really love, and you just hate for it to end, but it's going to end, and you're not sure if you're going to see them again, but you are going to, you may, it's that feeling. So, and it all goes back to not only the words of the song. That one is mostly sung through the phonetics and the melody that kind of give off that feeling. And that's where I end. I had some more, but we're getting pretty far. I think I covered everything. I could go on and on, but I get so excited. But that's where we're at. And I more than anything, I didn't come here to portray myself as you're saying an expert in the language and so forth. I wanted to show everyone that we all have the ability to pursue things that mean something to us. This is my example of what I've been able to go through my journey. And it takes patience and it takes consecutive work. And there's times that you want to quit, and there's times that you think, well, why am I even doing this? It's like no one even says it. Like you said, the children. Who's going to say it? But someone at some point kept it because it's still here today, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, maybe in these thousands of years. So someone didn't give up. So don't give up. Don't give up. And even if you think you're the only one out there, there was times when there was just 2 buffalo dancers and 5 people watching it. Yeah. And no buffalo dancers. This was resurrected. This was a dance that we brought out, and it took, to give you an idea, it took 7 years to build the dance, and I didn't even have dancers. So it's 7 years to build songs, build the choreography, to get the basic attire together. And then at that point, we didn't even have dancers. There was no sign of any dancers. Then I married Renee, and she had her 2 children, who I knew before her. They would dance all the time, or bow and arrow dances. They were little kids. Alyssa was like 8, and Jaden was like 5 or something like that. And they would go and dance, and I would go down there to help conduct the dances, so I knew them. And then, through chance, Renee and I became married, and then we integrated. She brought her family. I didn't have children of my own, and I never really thought there was a reason to. But like I say, there's always a journey, and you just got to go along for the ride and take it for what it is. But don't give up.
The youngest little buffalo there.
Yeah, he's my grandson. 6 years old. Yeah. So I never even thought I'd have kids to share it with, and then to think I'd have grandkids, and now this is the first year my grandson. So it's the next generation coming on. And what was really great is he still has his great grandfather on his dad's side. So that day, myself and his other grandfather addressed. His dad was there, myself, and his other grandfather, and his great-grandfather were all there to see him into the next generation. So before you leave, I brought some posters. I've been lucky enough to represent La Cosecha Dual Language Conference on 2 occasions. And this language is an international language conference in Albuquerque that happens on a yearly basis. And what it does is it promotes the dual language in our communities for equity among children, because a lot of times children and young kids that English isn't their first language, they get left behind because they don't have the equity, the tools to develop and to prosper. Not equality, I'm talking just basic tools that they need, a tutor or a little bit extra help. This foundation called La Cosecha Foundation is a dual language conference. It's international, so there's people from all over the world that come to this conference. On 2 occasions I've been able to represent them. This one was this year's, and it was the 30th anniversary. And this poster right here, it shows 30th anniversary. This tree is a 30-year-old cottonwood tree, and from it there's a piñata being broken. And this piñata is the scholastic symbol, the lamp. And I use that because oftentimes, like the way I told you, I learned this. We put too many perimeters on things when we do it in a scholastic way, and we feel like, oh, it has to be this way. Oh, you're not saying that right. You know, there's no period there, and so on and so forth. This little boy is busting this piñata open, and when he busts it open, it's busting out all the language in its most natural form is flowing out for the children to pick up and learn on their own. So there's no longer the boundaries that are placed upon it. And the wall behind it represents that boundary that keeps all that together, keeps us from maturing and venturing out. You see there's an opening in the wall, and it goes out into the fields of chilies that we're familiar with in New Mexico, and those chilies represent the sustenance of the words and the language that keep us alive. These right here, children that have grown and have taken advantage of the things that Cosecha has helped them with. So they're watching in celebration as the younger generation, the future generation is continuing going on. So I'd like for all of you to have one of these if you so like. Before you leave, you're welcome to one. Yes, thank you.
You didn't hear at the top of the conversation, this will be on Facebook or, pardon me, your YouTube channel?
Yes, I'll put it on the YouTube channel, so you can maybe go back if you want to go back and look at things or share them with somebody else. Or one of the things that, for me, I don't have a lot of money and things like that, but the one thing I can always give is knowledge, and that's one thing we can all give, and it's not going to take anything away from any of us. And all it's going to do is going to make the world prosper, right? We're all going to be rich from the language and the knowledge that we share with one another. And that's kind of what I like to do in these talks. One more last thing, if you have an opportunity, I think Charlene Sims asked the library to get a copy, to have a copy of this in the library, so it should be coming. This is the book that was written with myself and Dr. Shaul on the work that it was published this year. And this is an initial study of all the work. I'm not sure where we're going to put
We're
it.
actually working with Charlene Sims to establish an Indigenous knowledge section, just like the NAACP and Chicano section, up on the second floor here at Rollins. So it will go in the Indigenous knowledge section.
And it's available on Amazon. And did you buy yours on Amazon, or did you get yours through the Utah Press? Yeah, so I think they're out on Amazon, but it's at the University of Utah Press. They're a little pricey, and to be honest with you, it's not going to be your New York Times bestseller. It's more of a scholastic book, but it's very if you're into knowledge, language, and you want to know more about languages and how to reconstruct and revitalization. It is about the Piro language and Tanoan languages in general, but it will give you an idea and it'll help you out to understand the world of linguistics. Okay.
And I encourage you to read the other stuff rather than the massive Amazon that takes over everything.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think it's been out on Amazon for a little while, but it is available through there. And if you can't get a copy and you'd like one, just contact me and you can probably talk to Dr. Shaul and see where they have them available. Thank you again. Sure.
will have to run and see if we can do a story on your presentation.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be really nice. Thank you. Thank you, Giselle, for doing that for me. I appreciate it. Oh, get yourself a.
Phone number in case I have a couple more questions.
Sure.
Namaste.